"You will not embarrass yourself by weeping in my carriage," the Duke of Larkfell said, though his voice held no cruelty, only a strange, watchful stillness. "Whatever your Mr. Caro did to you, it is finished. You are a duchess now." Alaric Vane, 6th Duke of Larkfell, had watched the girl climb into his carriage an hour ago with the composure of a woman walking to her own execution, and he had thought her admirably brave. Now, as the lamps of the town fell away and the black country road unrolled beneath them, he studied Eleanor Wren by the swaying light and found he could not look away from her. She did not weep. That was the first thing that surprised him. She sat very straight, her gloved hands folded in her lap, her chin lifted just enough to be defiant. "I have no intention of weeping, Your Grace," she said. "I have already done all my weeping. There is none left." Alaric inclined his head. He was not a man to whom people spoke plainly. They stammered and bowed and got out of his way. He was called the Wolf of Larkfell in drawing rooms he was not meant to hear, and he had let the name stand because it kept fools at a distance. That this slight woman, 3 days robbed of her betrothed and married to a stranger by an arrangement her father had brokered in desperation, should answer him without flinching, it interested him more than he cared to admit. "You're Mr. Caro," he said. "Tell me what he was." "A gentleman of good prospects," Eleanor answered. "Or so he seemed. We were to be married Thursday. On Tuesday he wrote that a Miss Peverell of Bath had a fortune of £30,000 and that he was very sorry, but a man must think of his future." "And you," said Alaric, "were left with the invitations already sent." With the invitations sent, she agreed, and the whole county aware of it by the following morning. He turned his gaze to the window so she would not see what moved in his face. £30,000. A man had looked at Eleanor Wren, at that lifted chin, that steadiness, and chosen £30,000 instead. Alaric had 80,000 a year, and he thought Caro the poorest man in England. "You need not fear me," he said at last. "I know what is said of me. Little of it is true, and none of it concerns you. You will have your own rooms, your own servants, your own hours. I ask only that you keep the name with dignity. That, I think, you already know how to do." She looked at him then, truly looked, and he felt the look as if it had weight. "Why did you marry me, Your Grace?" she asked. "You could have had any woman in England. My father's estate is mortgaged past saving. I bring you nothing. Men do not marry nothing," is the question he had known she would ask, and the one he was not ready to answer. So he gave her a portion of the truth, which was all he trusted himself to give. "I had need of a wife," he said, "and I wished for one who would not bore me. I think you will not bore me, Miss Wren." "Duchess," he corrected himself. "Forgive me. It will take us both some time." Larkfell rose out of the dark like a cliff of stone, its long windows lit gold against the night. Eleanor gazed up at it, and Alaric watched her rather than the house. "It is very grand," she said. "It is very cold," he answered. "Houses of this size always are. But there are fires in the east wing, and Mrs. Dole will have prepared your rooms. Sleep, Duchess. Tomorrow the house is yours to learn." He did not tell her that he had ridden past her father's ruined gate a dozen times that autumn. He did not tell her that he had seen her once, months before Caro's letter, kneeling in the churchyard to write a fallen headstone that no one had paid to mend, a pauper's stone no kin of hers, and that the sight had lodged in him like a splinter he could not work loose. He did not tell her any of it. A man did not hand a woman his heart on the first night, least of all a man like him. The weeks that followed taught Alaric a great deal about his own house, because Eleanor learned it faster than he ever had. She learned the names of the servants, all of them down to the boy who carried coal, and she used the names, which Duchess before her had troubled to do. She learned that the west stair was rotten and had it mended before someone fell. She found the still room shut and dusty and opened it again, and soon the whole east wing smelled of dried lavender and simmering fruit. When old Barrow the gardener took a chill, it was the Duchess who sent broth, and when the vicar's wife came begging for the poor box, it was the Duchess who filled it without being asked. Alaric watched all of this from the edges, as was his habit. He was not a man who knew how to enter warmth. He had never been shown the door to it. His father had ruled Larkfell with a cold hand and a colder tongue, and Alaric had learned young that affection was a weakness other men exploited. So he stood in doorways and watched his wife make his house into something it had never been, and he said little, and he told himself he was satisfied to watch. She noticed. Of course she noticed. "You hover, your grace," she said one evening, finding him in the library doorway. A fire had been lit. She had ordered it, and the room that had been a tomb of unread books was, for the first time in his memory, comfortable. "You stand at the edge of every room I am in, as though you are waiting for permission to come inside your own house." "It is your house now," he said. "It is ours," she said, and the word struck him silent. She set down her mending and regarded him. "You are not the man they say you are. I have been here 2 months and I have not seen the Wolf of Larkfell once. I have seen a man who sends coal to widows and pretends it was the steward's doing." "Why do you hide it?" He crossed to the fire because he could not bear her eyes and needed somewhere to put his own. "A duke who is thought soft," he said, "is a duke who is used. My father taught me that, and he was seldom wrong about cruelty. It was the one subject he had mastered." "It is safer to be feared." "Safer," Elena said quietly, "but lonelier." He did not answer. He did not have to. She had seen it, and he understood. Standing there with the fire warming a face that had known too little of it, that she had seen him more clearly in 2 months than anyone had in 38 years. The truth came out at Christmas, and it came out by accident, which was perhaps the only way it ever could have. The great families of the county came to Larkfell for the 12th night ball, because a summons from the wolf was not refused. Among them, to Alaric's cold displeasure, came Mr. Julian Carow, newly-wed to his heiress, newly grand and eager to be seen bowing to a duke. Alaric had not invited him. His mother-in-law's cousin had, in the loose way of country lists, and Alaric had not thought to strike a name he had assumed would never dare appear. He watched Carow cross the ballroom toward Elena with a smile of oiled confidence, and Alaric moved to intercept. But Eleanor caught his eye across the crowd and gave the smallest shake of her head. "Let me," the look said. So he stood back and he watched, and his hand closed slowly on the stem of his glass. "Duchess," Carow said, bowing low, "how well the position becomes you. I confess I never imagined it. When I knew you, you were only Eleanor Wren, and now a duchess. One might almost thank me for it, huh? Had I not been called elsewhere, you should never have risen so high." The ballroom nearby had gone quiet in the way ballrooms do when they scent blood. Eleanor regarded him with perfect calm. "You misunderstand me, Mr. Carow," she said, clear enough to carry. "I do not thank you. But I do not blame you either. You saw £30,000 and could see nothing beyond it. My husband saw a woman mending a stranger's grave in a churchyard and never forgot her. That, I think, is the whole difference between the two of you. And it is why one of you is a duchess's forgotten acquaintance and the other is her duke." Alaric went very still. He had never told her. He had guarded that memory of the churchyard like a miser, certain no one living knew of it. And yet she had spoken it into the middle of a crowded ballroom as though she had always known, and now she turned and found his face across the room, and he understood from her expression that she had only that moment guessed the truth of it, from watching what her own words did to him. Carow, humbled and reddening, made his bow and his retreat, and no one in the county ever again spoke of Julian Carow as a clever man. But Alaric did not see him go. He crossed the floor to his wife, heedless of the watching hundred, and offered her his arm, and drew her out of the heat of the room into the cold gallery beyond. "You knew," she said. "It was not quite a question. I saw you that autumn," he said, low. "A year before your Carow ever wrote his letter. You were mending a headstone no one had paid you to touch, a pauper, a stranger, someone the whole parish had forgotten, and I thought," he stopped. He had never in his life said such a thing aloud. "I thought that a woman who would kneel in the cold for a stranger's forgotten name would not care whether a man was feared. And when your father came to me, half-ruined, ashamed, offering his daughter as though she were a debt to be paid, I said yes before he had finished the sentence. I let him think I did him a kindness. It was the most selfish thing I have ever done." Eleanor's eyes were bright. "You married me for that," she said. "For a grave I mended and thought no one saw." "I married you," Alaric said, "because I had spent my whole life being feared, and I saw one woman in a churchyard who I thought might not be afraid of me. I could not prove it. I only hoped. And you were about to be thrown away by a fool, and I could not." His voice failed him. "I could not let that stand." She was weeping now, though she had sworn on their wedding night she had no tears left, and he raised his hand, uncertain even yet whether he was permitted, and touched them from her cheek. "You said you had no tears," he murmured. "These are different ones," Eleanor said, and she laughed through them, and caught his hand against her face and held it there. "Alaric, you great, cold, frightened man. You gave me your whole house and your whole name and never once told me you had already given me your heart." "I did not know how," he said simply. "No one ever showed me the door to it. You did." Beyond the gallery the music began again, and the county danced on, and somewhere among them Julian Carew gathered his heiress and made an early departure that would be remarked upon for years. But in the cold gallery the Duke of Larkfell stood with his forehead bent to his wife's, her hands in his, and felt for the first time in his life that he was not standing in a doorway looking in at warmth, but standing at the very center of it, and it was his, and it had chosen him, and it would not leave. "Come," Eleanor said at last, wiping her eyes, smiling. "You cannot hide in a gallery. They will say the wolf has run from his own ball." "Let them say it," Alaric said. But he offered her his arm all the same, and led her back into the light, and when he took her into the dance he did not once look at the watching county, only at her. They were an old married couple before the parish stopped telling the story of the 12th night ball, and older still before they stopped disagreeing fondly on precisely what had been said. But on one point they never disagreed. Every autumn, on a certain grey morning, the Duke and Duchess of Larkfell walked together to the churchyard, and knelt, and tended a pauper's stone that bore no name they knew, and Alaric, who had once been the most feared man in 3 counties, would take his wife's cold hand in his, and think that everything he had ever wanted in the world had begun on his knees in the cold, watching a woman no one else had troubled to see.